Hello and welcome back once again to After the Credits. So it's the end of the year, and obviously that can only mean one thing, and that is that it's time for my year-end list of the top 12 movies that I saw in theaters in 2017. So first up, before we get started at number 12, we have a bit of an honorable mention. So as I was putting together this list, I found that I only had 11 movies selected for my top 12, realized I needed one more. So I went back through the list of movies I saw, selected a handful that could possibly be the number 12 spot. I think there were another 10 or so of those. Got that narrowed down to four. Got that four narrowed down to two. And these last two, I was back and forth a lot on as far as which one would actually make the list and which one would not. And I also debated whether or not to make it a tie or not. Now, I don't think it's going to be a tie, but I am going to give an honorable mention to the film that came in technically 13th place, and that movie is Baby Driver. Now, there was a lot of stuff I liked about Baby Driver. As I mentioned in the review, the entire opening scene where they're painting the lyrics to the song on the wall as he moves about the city, I thought that was visually impressive. Incorporating music as the main focus of the movie was also really good. There was also a lot of really good driving scenes that kept the movie kind of exciting. But at the end of the day, it was still just a heist movie. And as much as I enjoy a good heist movie, I feel like there have been a lot of heist movies over the last couple of years. And that's why Baby Driver fell just a little bit short of making the list this year. But I did still want to give it an honorable mention before we go into the actual number 12 spot, which goes to number 12, Home Again. So why did I select Home Again over Baby Driver? At the end of the day, Home Again is just a romantic comedy. But in the end, I just found Home Again to be a lot more enjoyable of a movie overall. As I said, at the end of the day, it's just another romantic comedy, but it did keep me laughing throughout most of it. And I never really felt like I was bored with the story. Like with certain parts of Baby Driver, specifically when all the heist stuff was going on, a lot of the Jamie Foxx stuff, it just got a little bit grating at times where I actually found myself saying, can we just move on and get to the next part or get back to the music or something that's not just the boring heist stuff? Where with Home Again, I didn't find myself doing that. Even when there was a little bit of a lull in the story, it picked back up relatively quickly and kept me drawn in throughout the majority of the film. And that's why Home Again is my number 12 pick for the top 12 movies I saw in 2017. Number 11. The number 11 spot this year goes to Kingsman: The Golden Circle. I like the original Kingsman film, so I was looking forward to the sequel coming out. Overall, it wasn't quite as good as the first one, but it still held up okay. It's still a new series, so there's still a lot more they can do with it. It hasn't been overplayed yet, like a lot of other movies that I saw this year. And even though I didn't quite enjoy this one as much as I did the original, I'm still interested in seeing where it goes in the future. But the fact that I didn't enjoy it quite as much as I did the first one is why it takes the number 11 spot on the top movies I saw in 2017. Number 10. The number 10 spot this year goes to Daddy's Home 2. Much like with the sequel to Kingsman, I enjoyed the first Daddy's Home, so I was kind of looking forward to the sequel. The first one left it off with a nice little cliffhanger of what was potentially going to come up in the sequel, so I was looking forward to seeing how that was going to play out. And as much as I did enjoy Daddy's Home 2, I didn't quite enjoy it as much as the first one. Some of my main issues with it were, one, it's a Will Ferrell film, and I just don't find Will Ferrell that funny. Secondly, they introduced John Cena's character at the end of the first one, which was going to be the lead into the second one. And in the second one, it felt like they almost didn't know what to do after they wrote him in. I feel like they were kind of in a spot where we introduced this character at the end of the last one, we got to do something with him. And they just really didn't know what they wanted to do. So their solution was to just wrap everything up in a Christmas story and expand the family to include some additional actors who may or may not be a little bit more funny, depending on how you feel about them in particular. Overall, it wasn't bad. I just feel like Hollywood's doing a lot of this. We don't know what to do with the sequel, so we'll just make it into a Christmas movie and kind of rehash everything we did in the first one, just not as good. With that said, it did still have enjoyable moments. It did still make me laugh. The main downfall was, again, it just didn't quite live up to the first one, which is something that sequels tend to do a lot. It's very rare that a sequel outdoes its original, and this is just another case of where the sequel fell just a little bit short of the finish line compared to the first one. And that's why Daddy's Home 2 takes the number 10 spot on the top movies I saw in 2017. Number 9. The number 9 spot this year goes to the Lego Batman movie. Now, I can't say that I've actually seen all of the Lego movies that have been out. I know I have missed a few of them, but from my understanding, you don't have to have seen the others in order to enjoy all of them because a lot of them are just kind of their own standalone stories. So I went into this one kind of blind, ended up really enjoying it. You could tell that the writers had a lot of love for classic Batman because they shoehorned in a lot of old references as well as a lot of new references, which made everything tie together really nicely. And they also did it with the whimsy of how a child would play Batman with his Lego pieces, which is overall what the Lego movies are, is a lot of them are scripted with the idea that a kid is playing with his Legos. So overall, I had a lot of fun with this movie, really enjoyed it. The one downfall I had with this film is they tried really hard to push this odd narrative that Batman and the Joker were in a romantic relationship. And I know in the comics they have done something somewhat similar, but not necessarily romantic, just that one can't exist without the other. So it's kind of like they're a couple in that regard. And that's what they were trying to do here, but they almost pushed it too far to where they played a lot more into that old stereotype from like the 50s and 60s where it was speculated that Batman and Robin were in a gay relationship, except in this one, it's not Batman and Robin, it's Batman and the Joker. And I just sort of felt that that wasn't necessary for the film. And not so much that they were saying Batman or the Joker were gay specifically, but that they were trying to play up a gay relationship for laughs. They could have found other less comedic ways to poke fun at that old narrative without trying to make a gay relationship into an overall joke. As much as I feel like they were trying to be progressive, I feel like they kind of missed the mark on that. And it came off slightly more negative than I think they intended it. But overall, that was my only real downfall with this film. Other than that, I really enjoyed it. And that's why the Lego Batman movie takes the number 9 spot on the top movies I saw in 2017. Number 8. The number 8 spot this year goes to Coco. Not really a whole lot to say about this one. It's your standard Disney Pixar affair, and those usually tend to do pretty well, and this one is no exception to that. So why do I rank this higher than the other films I've mentioned already? Despite it not really doing too much original, it still stood out in its own way. After seeing it in the theater, I found myself quoting a lot of it on a fairly daily basis with other coworkers while we were at work. We would just randomly start quoting lines, and we mostly did it just to make each other laugh, so we were kind of poking fun at it. But if you can poke fun at a movie and remember it in that much detail in order to be able to poke fun at it, then obviously that means you enjoyed it. Was it the best movie of the year? Obviously not, but it was memorable in its own way. And that's why Coco takes the number 8 spot for the top films that I saw in 2017. Number 7. Our number 7 spot this year goes to Wonder Woman. Now, obviously, I have an affinity for comic book movies. However, the DC-based movies haven't been doing quite as well as the Marvel-based movies. However, out of all the DC movies that have come out over the last couple years, surprisingly, Wonder Woman has been one of the better ones. However, as I said in the review, it's not without its flaws. There was a lot of stuff they could have done better in the film. If you watch the animated DC movie of Wonder Woman, I feel they portrayed her character a lot better. She was an Amazon first and a woman second. And in this film, I feel like they kind of got that reversed with her being kind of love struck over Steve. And when she came to the world of man, being overly emotional and on the verge of tears about a lot of things. And that's not traditionally the way Wonder Woman would act. As I said in the review, she would act more like a man than a woman because that's how the Amazons were. They weren't emotional little girls. They were warrior women who were just as tough, if not more so, than man. So I don't feel that Wonder Woman would have reacted the way that Gal Gadot portrayed her. I feel like they could have cast a better actress to fill out the role. But overall, for what it was, as I said, Wonder Woman was one of the more stronger DC-based films despite its flaws, and that's why Wonder Woman takes the number 7 spot this year on the top movies that I saw in 2017. Number 6. Our number 6 spot this year goes to The Belko Experiment. So I went into this film kind of blind, wasn't expecting a whole lot out of it because it was more of an indie film than it was a big studio film, but it still managed to catch my attention and made me want to go see it. And surprisingly, I ended up enjoying it quite a bit. And yes, even more so than all the other movies I've previously mentioned, including Wonder Woman, Coco, and all the others. It was an interesting premises. It had an interesting plot. Was it something that had been done before? Technically, yes, but they put a fresh enough spin on it that it kept me entertained, kept me drawn in, wanted to see what was going to happen next, how it ended. And that's really rare, even for a big budget Hollywood film, let alone a smaller independent film that has a studio backing big enough to get it into theaters, which overall was really impressive and is the main reason that The Belko Experiment is number 6 on my list of the top movies I saw in 2017. Number 5. Our number 5 spot this year goes to The Disaster Artist. And I am really surprised that it is this high up on the list because, as I said in the review, I really am not a big fan of James Franco. I try to avoid most things that he's in, except when I have to watch something specifically for a review on this channel. However, the film is based off of the book about the making of one of the best movies ever written, The Room, which in itself is so comedic that I feel that it would be very hard for even James Franco to screw it up. However, specifically being about the making of The Room, which is a film that I do enjoy as a guilty pleasure, one of those so bad it's good type of things, getting a little look at the behind the scenes of what went on during the making of that film is more so what puts this in the spot that it's in versus anything else related to the film, specifically the casting of James Franco and his brother. Overall, being the background story of the making of The Room is why The Disaster Artist is number 5 on my list of the top movies I saw in 2017. Number 4. Our number 4 spot this year goes to Get Out. Now, as I'm pretty sure I said in the review itself, I was not a fan in particular of Key and Peele. I don't tend to find sketch comedy shows funny in general. I feel like a lot of the jokes are forced and they try too hard to get them over, and it just strips all the funniness out of it to where I find nothing to laugh at in the end. And that wasn't just Key and Peele's show, it was SNL, it was Mad TV, anything like that I've never really been the biggest fan of. So being a first time out full-on script and film production for one of the members of the duo, I had my doubts going into it, and it ended up being really good. And another positive spin that I liked on the movie is that throughout the movie, we find that a lot of what's going on is targeted towards Black individuals. And at the end of the movie, a little bit of a spoiler in case you haven't seen it yet, the main character specifically asks why they target Black people, and the antagonist of the film specifically says that we were never specifically targeting Black people, you were just always the ones who showed up. Which I really like that they weren't pushing a racial agenda with it. They hinted towards it at first, and then they called it out directly, only to do a sudden twist at the end where, hey, it wasn't a race issue, it's just for some reason Black people kept showing up to what we were doing. So the fact that they weren't trying to push a race-baited agenda, and the fact that for a first time out from a comedian who I wasn't really a big fan of, I actually ended up liking it quite a bit, which overall is what ended up surprising me. Those are the reasons why Get Out is our number 4 spot on the top movies I saw in 2017. Number 3. Our number 3 spot this year goes to It Chapter 1. So growing up in the generation that I did, I grew up with the original It television miniseries, and I was really worried about them trying to replace Tim Curry as Pennywise the Clown because it was such an iconic role for him. It's something that stuck with him almost as much as the Rocky Horror Picture Show. If you ask anyone, name 2 Tim Curry films, those would usually be the first 2 that they mention is Rocky Horror and It. So going into the film, I wasn't expecting to like it because I thought it was going to be one of those situations of recasting the main actors just doesn't play as well as the original did, but I was pleasantly surprised to see that I was wrong and that the new actors were able to pull off the roles just as well as Tim Curry did in the original. Another thing I liked about this remake is they were actually able to fit quite a bit more from the book into the actual film, and they managed to do it in an hour and a half, almost 2 hours, where the original version was actually a TV miniseries that was in 5 parts, and each part was roughly an hour and a half, which means they had a total of 7, almost 8 hours to tell the overall story, and they had to cut out a lot of the stuff from the book that the remake was able to fit back in. Obviously, there's going to be a sequel to finish off the rest of the story instead of doing a back and forth between the adults and the children like the original miniseries did. This one was focused just on the kids, and the next one is going to be focused on them coming back as adults. And honestly, I think that was the best way to do it because, as I said, they get to get a lot more of the stuff from the book into the movie that they just weren't able to do in the miniseries for some unknown reason, because they had nearly double the length of time as what these 2 movies overall together are going to have. If each of these movies is an hour and a half to 2 hours, that's roughly 4 hours to tell the full story, where, as I said, the miniseries had almost double that at 8 hours and had to cut out a lot of stuff. So the fact that they were able to squeeze a lot more in from the book, the fact that they obviously knew ahead of time they're going to make the sequel, and the surprisingly good performance from the new cast to where I didn't find myself missing Tim Curry's portrayal of Pennywise, made me like this film quite a bit, and that's why It Chapter 1 is number 3 on my list of the top movies I saw in 2017. Number 2. The number 2 spot this year goes to another sequel with John Wick Chapter 2. Obviously, I love the first John Wick, so I was interested in seeing where they went with a sequel. Obviously, the first one didn't end with quite as much sequel bait as some of the other films that we mentioned on this list, so I wasn't really sure where the sequel was going to go. Obviously, we all hoped that it would delve a little bit more into who John Wick was in his past, but my main downfall with the film is I feel they kind of leaned too far into it. Obviously, in the first one, he was retired because he found someone that he loved. He wanted out to spend his life with her. Obviously, she passed away. He got drugged back into his old life. But at the end of the first film, he was kind of resolved. He had gotten his revenge, got a new dog, and said, let's go home. And it feels like he could have just kind of slipped back into his old life there. So fully going back into his former life as an assassin or whatever you want to call him seemed like a little bit of a stretch to me, outside of the fact that going back to his normal life, he would still be dealing with the depression of his wife's passing, and going back into that life kind of gave him something to do to take his mind off of it, which is the only way I really see it fitting that he fully went back into that life the way that he did. So it was an obvious fit for a sequel, but as I said, I feel like they kind of pushed into it a little bit too hard, where I feel that they could have had a little bit more of a lead up, like he's back at home, he's just trying to live a normal life again, and something else drags him back into it again. Then you could always lead into a potential third film where by the end of the second one, he's now kind of stuck into that life and has no choice but to continue into it. But I feel like this one kind of missed that mark a little bit by just having him jump right back into it versus having a segment of him back at home trying to be normal again and just not being able to maintain. Overall, it was still a fun movie, still a lot of good action scenes, but that kind of forced re-entry into his old life where the first film left off with him being kind of done with it again is what kind of brought this one down, and why John Wick Chapter 2 is only the number 2 spot on my list of the top movies I saw in 2017. Number 1. And the number 1 spot of the top films I saw in 2017 goes to Happy Death Day. Now, obviously, it's not an original concept. It's basically Groundhog Day, but it is Groundhog Day if Groundhog Day was a suspense thriller, mystery, horror film versus the rom-com that Groundhog Day actually was. So it's interesting to see the time loop aesthetic played out in a different way. It was fun. It kept me tagging along through the whole thing of trying to figure out what's going on, who the killer was, why they were targeting the main character, and how everything was going to resolve at the end. All of that made it just different enough that I really ended up enjoying the film and would like to see more from this franchise if they can find a way to keep it moving forward. But even if it's just a one and done, it still ended up being my favorite film of the year. And that's why Happy Death Day is the number 1 spot on my list of the top films I saw in 2017. And there we have it. That is my list of the top 12 films that I saw in 2017. And as always, we will be following this up with my list of the 12 worst films I saw in 2017. So keep an eye out for that. But that is going to do it for this episode. As always, thank you for watching. And until next time, we'll see you after the credits.